Think for a moment about your body's amazing ability to heal itself. A cut closes up, a cold eventually goes away. But what if accessing that power, that sort of built-in balancing act, was less about fighting symptoms and more about, well, understanding a kind of forgotten language within us? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into a work that really shook things up in medicine, The Organon of Medicine by Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. Get ready to maybe put aside some assumptions about treating illness, because we're going to explore a view that puts your own vital force, your body's own wisdom, right at the heart of healing.
That's a great way to put it. We're looking at a text, from the early 1800s, but one that still makes you think, still offers this completely different way of seeing health. Hahnemann's Organon. It's not just some dusty old medical book. It's really a deep dive into what being well means and, how we can best support our body's own power to fix itself. So if you've ever felt like maybe modern medicine is missing a piece or you're just curious about other ways, well, this look into the Organon is going to be a pretty fascinating journey into self-understanding and inner power.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit.
Sure.
Early 1800s Europe, the sources we looked at, they paint a pretty grim picture of medicine back then. Bloodletting, mercury, toxic stuff. It sounds awful.
Oh, it was. Yeah. It was a time when, frankly, the treatments could often be worse than the disease itself. The materials really highlight this. I mean, imagine being sick and the main options involve procedures that actually make you weaker.
Yeah, scary.
Exactly. And it's against that backdrop of this landscape of often harmful, often useless practices that Samuel Hahnemann steps in. He was a doctor, deeply worried about his patients, and he started searching for a better way. A gentler way, a truer way to heal. His dissatisfaction wasn't just academic. He really wanted to help people without hurting them more.
Right, and it wasn't just thinking about it, was it? There was that key moment, that experiment he did on himself with cinchona bark that kind of lit the fuse for his whole cures-like idea.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk us through that? Why was that so important?
It's actually quite remarkable how his own personal test led to such a massive shift. He was curious why cinchona bark worked for malaria, so he took it himself. While he was healthy.
Bold move.
It was. And what happened? He started getting symptoms that felt, incredibly similar to malaria. Now, most doctors might have just shrugged it off, a weird reaction. But Hahnemann saw it as a vital clue. It led him straight to this principle, cures-like. The idea that if a substance causes certain symptoms in a healthy person, then a tiny, highly diluted dose of that same substance could actually trigger the body's own healing response when faced with similar symptoms in someone who's sick. It's about using the body's reactions as a map and a catalyst for getting better, not just shutting down the symptoms you see on the outside.
Okay, so instead of a frontal assault on the illness, it's more like giving the body a quiet suggestion, speaking its own language almost, to gently encourage it to fix itself. That's a completely different way of thinking, isn't it?
Completely different. And when you think about those harsh treatments common back then, Hahnemann's approach was nothing short of revolutionary. He wasn't trying to blast the disease away with force. He was trying to coax the body's own built-in ability to find balance again. And this idea, this core concept that the power to heal is inside us, becomes just central to everything he writes.
Which leads us right to the book itself, The Organon of Medicine. So this whole idea, homeopathy, it wasn't just a flash in the pan for him. It was his life's work, something he kept working on, refining.
Absolutely. The Organon is really the culmination, the big statement of his principles, his findings, and the whole philosophy behind his approach to healing. And the fact that he put out 6 editions throughout his life, each one building on the last, showing how his understanding grew, how he kept fine-tuning this art of stimulating self-healing.
Yeah.
That really shows his dedication, the depth of his work. It wasn't just a set of rules fixed in stone. It was a living, evolving way of thinking about medicine.
Yeah, the material we looked at uses some strong words to describe it, not just textbook, but things like manifesto, even rebellion. Why frame it like that? What was so radical about it?
Well, because back then, and maybe even still today, the Organon just fundamentally challenged the bedrock assumptions of standard medicine. It was definitely a rebellion against what they called heroic medicine, all those aggressive, often dangerous treatments. It was a manifesto calling for a different way, patient-focused, holistic, gentler. Hahnemann dared to ask this really basic question: what's a doctor actually for? And in a time when the focus was all about fighting disease, attacking it,
Right.
his answer to restore health rapidly, gently, and permanently using the least harmful means, that was just wow. It completely flipped the script. It shifted the focus away from just battling symptoms to actively supporting the body's own power to get well.
And that brings us to this really interesting concept, totally central to the Organon, the vital force. Now, that might sound a bit, I don't know, mystical maybe, to a modern ear. What did Hahnemann mean by vital force? Why is it so important in his system?
Yeah, it's a key point, and it gets to the heart of how Hahnemann saw health and illness differently. The vital force, as he talks about it, isn't really some vague, floaty energy. It's more like the inherent dynamic energy that makes a living thing alive. It maintains order, keeps things running, always tries to find balance.
Like the body's own management system. It's innate intelligence.
Exactly. That's a good way to think about it. The body's self-regulating intelligence. And according to the Organon, disease isn't just, say, your liver malfunctioning. It's seen as a sign that this vital force, this life energy, has been disturbed or knocked off balance.
Okay, so when we feel symptoms, a headache, maybe a rash, or just feeling totally wiped out, those aren't just random biological errors. They're actually signals. The body's trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
That this vital force is out of whack.
Precisely. The sources make it really clear that for Hahnemann, symptoms aren't the bad guy you need to silence.
No.
They're actually expressions of the vital force struggling to get back into balance.
Right.
They contain really valuable clues about what's actually gone wrong. So the goal in homeopathy, as the Organon lays it out, isn't just to make the symptoms disappear. It's to understand the specific way the vital force is disturbed and then use remedies, very carefully chosen remedies that kind of resonate with that specific disturbance, to gently nudge the vital force back towards harmony.
Wow. Okay, now this next idea from the Organon, this really jumped out at me as incredibly forward-thinking for the early 1800s. The focus on individualized healing. It's not just treating the flu like it's the same for everyone, but understanding how this specific person is experiencing it.
Yes. And what's so insightful there is Hahnemann's deep understanding that even if two people have the same diagnosis on paper, the way they experience that illness is totally unique. It's deeply personal. Their medical history, their personality, their emotional state, their lifestyle, even the very specific way their pain feels or where it shows up. All these things make up what he called the totality of the symptoms.
The whole picture.
The whole picture, exactly. The Organon insists that a real healer has to look beyond the simple disease name. They need to carefully gather all this information, this complete story the person is telling through their body, their mind, their emotions.
So it's kind of like being a detective, isn't it? Putting together not just the obvious clues, but all the little subtle individual bits of each person's unique situation. And that makes healing feel like a really personal journey.
It absolutely does. The material we looked at even suggests that this super individualized approach, it can create a really strong connection between the practitioner and the person seeking help. It leads to a much deeper understanding of their specific path back to feeling well. It's about respecting that everyone is different and crafting the approach just for them.
And I guess ultimately, maybe one of the most empowering messages that comes through from the Organon is this fundamental belief that the real power to heal doesn't come from outside somewhere, but actually from within us.
That is absolutely a core idea in Hahnemann's philosophy, and it's incredibly empowering, isn't it? The Organon really stresses that we're not just passive victims of illness. We possess this innate, built-in capacity for healing, for self-regulation. The body isn't seen as like a broken machine that needs external parts or constant fixing. It's seen as this dynamic, intelligent system that has its own powerful drive towards health, towards wholeness. So homeopathy, as the Organon describes it, is all about supporting that inner potential, stimulating it. It's about building trust in the body's own wisdom rather than trying to, control it or suppress what it's trying to do.
It's about recognizing and maybe restoring what some of the sources call the sacred intelligence living inside every cell in our bodies.
Precisely. It's a real shift in viewpoint, moving away from seeing the body as something that constantly needs managing and fixing and towards appreciating its own amazing ability to self-correct its resilience. The Organon invites us to shift from fighting against disease to nurturing and supporting the body's incredible power to heal.
It's definitely clear that the Organon of Medicine gives us a very, very different lens for looking at health and healing. And while, maybe it's easy to dismiss it today with all our technology, it really seems to hold some valuable insights about the body's own wisdom that maybe we overlook sometimes.
What's really interesting is that even though it's, over 200 years old, The Organon raises these basic questions about healing that are still so relevant today. The material we explored really highlights the deep compassion in Hahnemann's approach, that strong sense of purpose in truly understanding how an individual experiences being ill, and that solid belief in the body's own power to recover. These are ideas that can enrich how we think about health, no matter what kind of treatment path we choose.
So as we go about our own health journeys, whether we're dealing with something chronic or just everyday tiredness or maybe emotional struggles, or even just looking for a deeper sense of well-being, perhaps the big takeaway from the Organon is just remembering that we actually have that fundamental capacity for healing already inside us.
Exactly right. The Organon of Medicine, as our sources suggest, isn't just some old medical book on a shelf. It can be like a mirror, showing us our own potential for wellness.
Yeah.
It can be a guide, suggesting a different kind of path. And it's definitely a powerful reminder to reconnect with the wisdom that's already in our bodies and, well, within our deeper selves.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe the deepest secrets to healing aren't things we need to discover out there, but rather things we just need to remember are already in here. It's definitely something powerful to chew on.